What we're going to do here is add a gruesome texture onto this face which already shows strain and distress. We'll need to use several different functions to make it work properly. The technique can have many applications. We can add a new texture onto anything, wrapping an image around the contours of another rather than just merging it in as a flat image. Or we can add texture onto a piece of furniture. The texture I'm going to use here is distress paint on a wall. The whole wall was so dramatic that it looked like a work of abstract art in itself. Some old paint might have extreme cracks, and all these things are worth photographing and filing away as possible backgrounds later. So firstly, we drag the texture onto the face. We can get rid of the original for now. We lower its opacity to 50% by pressing 5 on the keyboard, and then we can move it around until we find a suitable match. Let's see, try it around there. That looks okay. Now I want to remove the excess around the head, so I'll use a lasso to make a rough selection. Open that out a bit, make a rough selection around the head and the face. Take it in big steps. We'll need some of this material around the outside, as you'll see in a moment. So I press delete, get rid of that. Cancel the selection with Control D or Command D, and I'll use a crop tool just to get rid of everything else that we can't see. Crop, yes, of course. Now we need to shape the edges around the face a bit better than they are, make them curve in a bit. So we'll use the warp function, edit, transform and warp, and we can move in some of the edges, draw them in closer, not that one, otherwise we lose something over the shoulder. This one can come down. This one can come in. Now the area in the center stays in much the same position, but the edges are drawn in and it sort of wraps around the face a bit better. Okay, that's the start, so we'll OK that. I'm going to make some more adjustments, this time using the puppet warp. Edit puppet warp. We need to put in some anchor points to stop the central part of the picture moving around. One more there. Hold that in place. Now with an anchor point here, I can drag that down. Another one there. Bit under the ear. The top part of the head and the sides look alright, but it's these lower edges we weren't able to do with the first warp function. So I'll lock a few places, move that in, a bit too much, losing a bit there. So it's being distorted just around the sides. We'll OK that. Now I think the best way of blending in a texture like this is using a displacement map, which will wrap the texture around some of the contours of the face. First we make a duplicate of this image, image duplicate. I'm going to call it face. and we don't need the top layer for this. Eliminate that. Now save that. I save this as a Photoshop file. It must be a Photoshop file, not a JPEG or a TIFF. Save it on the desktop. Where is it? And I'll just put the extension on there, which is .psd. We can close it. Back to the original with the texture layer active. We go to Filter, Distort, Displace. Now at the moment it's set horizontal scale 10, vertical scale 10, stretch to fit, fine, repeat edge pixels, fine. We'll try that, see what it looks like. Then we have to select the image, the face image, which is our model. Open, and it has distorted it. Just go back to history to see how much. Not a great deal. So I think we'll have more displacement there. Filter, distort, displace. This time I'm going to go to 30 pixels on both sides. OK. Choose our model. Let's have a look at that. Yes, that's much better. I'll go with that, I think. You have to be careful with the displacement map. If you have it set too high with some subjects, like a very precise texture, it'll go a bit out of focus. So bear that in mind when you're using it on certain subjects. I'm going to set the blending mode to multiply. It tends to be quite a good one for blending in. And there we see the texture on the face. Looks quite gruesome, doesn't it? You can change the opacity. That's a bit too strong. 3 is quite mild. I'll leave it at 50% for now. But we need to trim off the waste around the edge, because we can see that here, for example. There's some unnecessary stuff, and a bit on the other side. So I'm going to select the head with the pen tool. Close that off. Pen tool. And just go around and enlarge it somewhat. And there we have the face selected. We turn that into a selection with Control Return or Command Return and give it a bit of a feather. Select Modify Feather. 2 is fine now. Okay. Invert the selection with Control Shift I, Command Shift I. Make the texture layer active and press Delete. Get rid of that selection, Control D, Command D, and there we've got our texture. Still more work to do there. Now we don't want the texture over the teeth, so we need to mask out that bit. In the Layers panel, add a mask to the texture layer, enlarge it, 100% is enough. With a black brush, small one, 90% hardness. Just go over the teeth. They're not very good teeth, but in keeping with the distress situation. And also a bit over the eyes, a small brush. We don't want it going quite over all of the eye. A bit in there. And perhaps a little bit off the eyebrow. Let's have a very soft brush. Strength down to 20. so we see a bit more eyebrow rather than just completely texture. We hold down Shift and click on the mask. We can see it with and without the effect of the mask. Take a little bit out there. That's okay. Now I want to put a bit of colour into those teeth, make them a little less white, so I'll use an adjustment layer, hue and saturation. Fill it with black first, depending where your black is on the in the toolbox. In this case it's going to be Control backspace or Command backspace. Brush, set that at 100% opacity again, and just for now just open up that teeth area. Now we can set a colour, colorize it. It's automatically gone to a sort of yellow, which is okay actually. So it's a bit stronger now, it's too strong. Just a little bit of a hint. We don't want teeth looking too healthy here. Right, now make it a bit more accurate, exposing the teeth. Press X for a black brush, just to make sure that colour doesn't go over any of the gums. That's fine. Let's have a look at the whole image. I think I'll adjust the shape of this texture underneath the chin. For that I'm going to use the liquify function. Let's make the texture layer active and go to Filter, Liquify. Check the box for Show Backdrop. That way we can see the background through the texture. Use background. Now with a brush, slightly bigger brush than that. This is the forward warp tool, which is the top one in the toolbox. Just going to merge it in under the chin a bit, just to distort it slightly. A bit more. There's so much distortion already in this texture, there's not a lot we need to do with it. If you're dealing with a much more uniform texture, like scales, this sort of thing, then the liquify tool can be used much more to shape it around the contours of the face, just to help it along. But in our case, there's so much shape already in this texture, we don't need to do that. There are a couple of more things we need to do. The head, the face is all in focus, but the shoulders are going out of focus, so the texture needs to go out of focus slightly just to blend in properly down there. For that we'll use the blur tool just to make it a bit fuzzy. Texture layer is active, blur tool here. We'll have quite a soft brush, we'll go to 0. Change size and a low strength. It's best to do this gradually, and then you've got more control. Let's have a bigger brush there and just brushing over the texture in the shoulder area until it goes more blurred, more out of focus. And the same this side. That's okay. Now finally that texture itself, maybe it's just too strong and just too extreme. We can lower the opacity. Let's try it at 30. 3 on the keypad will take us to opacity of 30. Maybe that's a bit too weak. And we can adjust the colour. That's still at 50% at the moment. I'm going to add another hue saturation adjustment layer. This one needs to be attached just to the texture. I'm going to desaturate the colour to some extent. Yes. It's a bit better. I think it's too strong, so I'm going to cut that down to 40%. Now back to 50. I'm going to try a curves layer on that just to lighten the texture a bit. Yes, that's a bit better. So it's still on 50% opacity, but I've lightened the tones a bit. And there we are. You can play around with those different values. And there's our gruesome face with a nasty skin problem. One little point I've noticed here, which I'm sure everybody's seen already, is that I've lost a bit of texture on the shoulder here. That happened when I was using the warp tool. So we can repair that, make the texture layer active, use the stamp tool S, slightly larger brush, a little bit soft, make the picture 100% size, and we want the bottom right corner. That brush is a bit too big. Take a sample, cut another sample, back to normal size. There we are. So the most important function we used there was the displacement map to shape the texture around the contours of the face, but the warp tool helped, and there was a little bit with the puppet warp and a very small amount with the liquify filter.